I'm Scott Allen Miller. It's the 26th of September, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua. Today we've got a couple of more questions from the audience, including one that is really in depth that wants to go into how we can replicate life from wherever we're coming from into Nicaragua, and that's got a lot of sub pieces, so we're going to go into that primarily. We're also going to touch on why you don't want to be the first house in a gated community. There were several questions about that, so we're going to touch on those and more. We're going to get to that right after the bump. Don't buy until you've lived here for a year. Just general advice, do not buy in Nicaragua until you have been here at least a year renting. It's important for any place that you're looking at moving that you're going to give it time to get to know. And a place like Nicaragua, which is so much different, so much more difficult to really anticipate what life is going to be like compared to other places, to give it at least a year to really understand how it's going to fit for you, how you're going to want to live here, how it's going to affect your life. It's really important. And really that should go anywhere. But here, I think the importance of giving it that time to understand how things work and really see how you're going to fit in and what you want is more important than ever. She also says, don't ever buy in a gated community without any houses built, meaning don't be the first one in. So, and I said, oh, great point, empty gated. Seems so nice, but it's such a bad idea. Waterman Kaimoana said, I'm curious, how do any houses ever get built in a gated community then? It seems as though somebody has to be the first to build or nothing would ever get built. Respectfully, are you able to explain this comment a bit? I see some great buys in communities with very few houses. That's why I asked. So this is really important. So the reason, let's start with the why. Why are we concerned about it? So there are many gated communities here in Nicaragua. It is very popular to build a gated community. It's like a thing to do. And what happens very often is that gated communities get built, and we see these all the time, and I've talked about them on the show. Only one or two houses ever go in, and there's many that never got any. Typically, when you have never gotten a single one and they go for a couple of years, they get overgrown and people forget that they're there, and we don't realize that they're there. But out in Las Piñitas, at a prime bit of real estate, there's one. Not a single house was ever built, and there's a huge gated community that has been sitting idle for most of a decade, and it's still idle today. No one ever talks about it. No one realizes it's there. No one has any idea how to buy a house in it. And if you were to buy a house in that community, that's where things get really bad. The fact that some never get a house is not really here nor there. It doesn't affect you because you don't have a house there. Unless you're a builder, don't do that. But what happens very often is that you end up being the first in. And when you're the first one in, you may be taking a risk. You're saying, ooh, this place looks great. It's beautiful. They just built it. I want something brand new and oh, the future's so bright. And that's great, and it might be. But the danger is, and this is common, you build a house and no one else shares your vision. You get the first one, no one comes along after you, or maybe one person does. And I know there's developments all over the place that we see with one or two houses that have been there for many years. And those people have to pay for their gate guards. They have to pay for their maintenance. They have to pay for their private roads. They have to pay for all their municipals. There's all these services, like an HOA style thing typically, that you have to pay for, and you're stuck in a gated community that either ends up being super expensive and you're paying, let's say as a community that was meant to have 40 houses and you're the only one, you might be paying 40 times the anticipated per month dues, at least for some things. And if nothing ever comes in, perhaps they're going to cancel those services and suddenly things just become overgrown, or the security is removed and they just open the gates or whatever. You end up with carrying a lot of risk and burden, and there's a really good chance no one's ever going to come. You're always gambling, like there's always the chance that someone will come, but it's really common for them not to. And this risk is enormous. And we see this especially in places like San Juan del Sur, where so many gated communities went in, and there's so many questionable property situations that you can actually end up in situations where maybe the other properties aren't free and clear, or lots of people, this is really bad, loads of people invest in the land and never build. And this is a major factor here, especially in more touristy areas, and anything you've seen online could easily be part of this. They buy the land and say, well, when everyone builds, I'm going to be worth that much more and then I'll sell it. Or maybe I'll build after I know that it's become a good investment. And so they're buying really cheap land, because what does the land in a development cost? $2,000, $3,000? Like, it's easy to just go buy a lot and hope for the best. And then if everyone builds and your spot is worth a lot more, either you build and you know that your house is going into a place where you're sharing with lots of other people, and that's great, and you have security and all those amenities are there, or you simply never build, and or if they do, everyone else builds, you can sell and maybe double what you invested because now you're a desirable lot. We see that happen. And so because it is so common for such a huge percentage of foreigners to do exactly that, buy a lot and never build on it, there's this huge risk that you could end up in a development where there's no possibility of another house going in, and everyone ends up waiting for everyone else. We see this in San Juan del Sur especially. I've been told about entire developments where they're all sold mostly as a kind of one of those greasy sales pitches where they get everyone in and it's like a timeshare, and they're like, oh, it's gonna be this amazing thing, it's gonna make all this money, and they do it to a very specific group of people. So it's one group of like American or Canadian investors who all come from the same industry, and they buy pretty heavily in a development. Not everyone, but lots of the lots, and they all go, oh wait, I thought people were going to build, I thought it was going to, there's all these things it was supposed to do, and because nobody is investing, they never put in the water, they never put in the internet, they never put in the roads, and suddenly all those lots are now worthless. But the people who hold them are unwilling to sell them because they invested something and they're embarrassed, or they have a sunk cost fallacy, they don't understand business, they don't really care about the land, they're not coming down here to inspect it, and so it kind of ends up in a stalemate where the builder doesn't care because they got their money selling the lots and they're done, they're out. And the people who are buying the lots, they're just kind of abandoning them, but they still own the property, so no one can come in and fix the situation. The owners are just keeping them empty, and the builder has no way to do anything if they wanted to, but they've already made their money, so what do they care? So we see these kinds of things quite often, and it's important to know that these risks exist, and that if you're going to put into a gated community, you need to have a lot of faith that that community is going to do something that you want in the future. So then the question comes up, well, how could a gated community get started if you're telling people not to be the first one in? Well, telling people not to do dumb things is not the same as people don't do dumb things, right? People do foolish things all the time. The majority of what people do isn't smart. That's just the way it is, right? So if it's dumb or dangerous or risky to be the first or second into a gated community, you can guarantee that loads of people are going to do it. That's not a problem. It's the future people. We're not trying to protect all people. I mean, we are. We wish we could protect everyone from being stupid. But what we're trying to do is protect you. And that's different. Telling you how to do things well does not mean that other people won't. So that's one way that initial houses get built. Now, you may say, but how should they get started if you didn't have some foolish people taking that risk? And that's also a great question. So in a community like that, the builder or their family or other investors that are part of their group, people who trust the builder, can go in and buy the first or second or several houses and get the ball rolling and use them as rentals or sell them later as finished houses, whatever. Those options exist, and if they believe in their project, it's not a big deal to do that. And there's always the possibility that in doing so, some people willing to take a little bit more risk will jump in early and start buying houses as well. There are ways to get the ball rolling, and in many developments that have made at least some effort to good faith get started, do exactly that. We see that all over the place. Unfortunately, we also see them get burned. Many times the builders go build a single house, price it outrageously high, and then discover that they've designed and built something that has no market. And so had someone come along and built another house, they would have gotten screwed. But luckily, you see the builder did it, and the builder's house has now been cut by 50%, and still nobody wants it, and it's sitting there rotting away, and the entire development then becomes abandoned. Very common. So really, you can pretty much look to builders to take that risk, or simply rely on other people who are very foolish. And there are people who legitimately should take that risk, right? There's a new gated community. They're across the street from my mom's house. They're next to a restaurant I like. I want to be there, and I'm willing to be the only one in that community if that's how it works out. Okay, great. Make that an intelligent decision. I think as a foreigner, you don't want to do that. You have so little insight into markets and all kinds of things. Don't be taking those kinds of risks. It's very foolish. And if you're seeing a community, if you're seeing a community that's brand new and lots are selling quickly and people are literally breaking ground, not just saying they're going to build, actually putting money into putting houses up, yes, going in slightly early, not a big deal under most circumstances. Know that you're taking some risk, but it's probably pretty small. But if you're going into, oh, this place has been here a little while, it looks nice, there's barely any things, there's some good deals, they're probably good deals because they're not worth very much. There's probably something wrong, whether just no one else is interested in it, no one else is coming, whatever. If you see a good deal, be like, ooh, why is it a good deal? But then again, most people see incredibly high prices advertised abroad. And when people tell me, I found a good deal, and then they tell me how much it is, I'm like, you do realize that's like double market value. That's not what we call a good deal. Good deal is below market value. Maybe just a little, but at least below. At market value is a fair deal. Above market value is a bad deal or poor deal, depending on how much it is. It doesn't have to be terrible, and that doesn't mean you never want to pay more, but that's a poor deal. You have to be less than market value to be a good deal. I've never once in my memory had someone tell me that they got a good deal, and when they disclosed how much it was, that we felt it seemed like a good deal based on what they paid and what they seem to have gotten and where they are. Pretty typically, people get pretty excited about any deal they get, and the reality is they overpay. And then say, no, it was a good deal. And you say, how do you know that? And they don't have a reason. So that said, just be aware. Chances are, if you're looking at a gated community, the price is probably on the high side. And if you're in the first few houses, there's probably no pressure to buy. Give it some time and see if things move forward. If 4 or 5 more houses get sold, absolutely, if it's something you want, jump in. But being that very first house carries a tremendous amount of risk, and risk that you may never be able to unload. Remember, selling a house here can be right on the verge of impossible. And so if you're in that position where you're like, okay, well, I'll just sell the house if things don't go well. Well, the same advice that we've just given you not to have purchased it applies to everyone else as well. The difference is once that house is built and no one else has come and that first one goes up for sale, you can pretty much guarantee that no one's ever going to look at that community again, because it means that there's a time where there's absolutely zero people who want to live there, including the people who've already made a huge commitment to it. That's a big statement that it is not a valuable location. So you end up in a very tenuous position where selling your own house essentially guarantees you will have to sell it for much less than you must have paid. All right, and our big question for the day from Dizzy Reckless 5991. Hi, Scott. Thanks for taking the time to produce all this information for us. You're welcome. Where I get confused is, how do I replicate some of my life in Nicaragua? And this is a really legitimate question. Replicating your life here is very difficult, and generally that's not what you want to do. Of course, there's some amounts you need to replicate because that's what makes you you, but it is a challenge, and for the most part, you want to think of Nicaragua as adapting, not replicating, but certainly there are times you need to replicate as well. My wife and I are currently evaluating a number of countries to move to from Australia. My wife is a qualified nurse, and I would like to open a small business, probably a cafe on the beach. We would want to be able to start business, buy a motorbike and car, etc. Are foreigners allowed? There's a lot of questions here. Are foreigners allowed to own a business? Are we allowed to own motorbikes legally registered in our names, etc.? Are we allowed to own land? If there are no long-term visas, then even if we are legally allowed to own our own things, then what would be the point? I've asked previously about visas and was told just to come to Nicaragua. That is correct. That is what you do. That is not something I would consider. It should be. You're ruling out things based on things that don't make sense. As just taking a chance that things will work out is a little risky. No, it's by far the least risky thing you can do. This is really important. That is not a good evaluation of risk. Going to most countries with paperwork is hundreds of times more risky than coming to Nicaragua without paperwork. It's not saying that this is the least risky place. It's not saying that every situation is more risky. What I'm saying is that this is the process, and the risk is ridiculously low, and the paperwork is just paperwork. It doesn't protect you in the way that people imagine. It's really not valuable. So there's a lot of, it doesn't actually make sense to consider things in this way, but we're going to dive into that. Do you know what kinds of visa exist by any chance? We would like to establish some kind of normalcy in our lives. Unfortunately, Nicaragua doesn't have a presence in Australia, so we have to rely on word of mouth, which seems kind of odd. It's just a small country, like that's the only reason. The other countries on our list are Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Mexico. Those countries seem to have relatively straightforward avenues for entry, purchasing rights, etc. It's not really true. Any advice would be great. We know we want to visit, and as far as I know, they have tourist visa on arrival, but I'd like a better picture before we spend a bunch of money just coming over. Okay, so we're going to take some of this from the other side. I'm going to start with the other countries on the list are, so all of those countries do have relatively simple systems for getting in, but all of them are way more complex than here. They're all much more expensive. They're all much more difficult. So that's really important, that sense of I'm going to have some paper. That paper never gets you more security, and not necessarily less, but it's never going to be more than just showing up in Nicaragua. So that's a complete misconception of where the risk comes from in that. All those countries can immediately kick you out, regardless of what visa you have, regardless of what residency you have. Same here in Nicaragua. Any country, anytime you move to a foreign country, you have the risk of simply being kicked out. That you have a long-term visa or you have residency only gives you certain non-deterministic rights around how you handle your paperwork to stay. Does that make sense? Those things aren't a universal. A long-term, let's say, residency is different in every country. Every country's concept of residency is different. And a residency in Mexico and a residency in Nicaragua, while similar, are not identical. You have different rights, different processes, different procedures. You still have to do certain things to be able to stay in both countries. It's not the same as becoming citizens. There's just a million different things. And you have to look at the big picture. You can't just look at, I have a visa or I don't have a visa. This is easy, this is hard. If you want to say what is easy, your tourist visa that allows you to do everything you really realistically want to do in Nicaragua, there's nothing on earth easier. It is literally the easiest country, or equal to a list of easiest countries, which is not very long, to come to and get started. It is the most straightforward, most easy for the starter. Over the long haul, it's pretty good, but it's not the best. But for that first piece, this is as good as it can get. If you're questioning Nicaragua, your only response, if that's not good enough, is to never leave Australia, which hopefully is not the case. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of other things we're going to say. They're going to say, ooh, maybe Nicaragua is not the place for me. But that one is not it. That's the one, if that was the issue, that is a slam dunk for Nicaragua. No one else is in the running, right? I can't visit any of those countries. Well, Mexico I can, as an American. I can visit Mexico very easily. But of the others, I can't go through their airports as easily as I can move and start a business in Nicaragua. Okay, so that's really important. The order of magnitude of difference between these is so extreme that the presentation of the way that risk is being perceived, and I understand a lot of it's because there's just not good information anywhere, is misleading. So that's huge. Now, coming from Australia, some of those places like Malaysia is ridiculously close and probably has very special entry easements for, is that the correct use of that word, for Australians. They don't have for Americans, right? Because my perspective is coming from the United States. But Nicaragua treats the U.S. and Australia the same, I believe, in that case. And so the degree to which it is easy, and I know Australians who've come here and done this, right? The degree to which this is as easy as it gets, as straightforward, as little process as it gets, is dramatic. Okay, we're going to start with question 1 and then jump to the thing that was said above. Are foreigners allowed to own a business in Nicaragua? Yes. It is one of the absolute most open investment markets that you will encounter. You are able to invest in Nicaragua, one, from Australia without ever having set foot in Nicaragua. No problem whatsoever. You can do business in Nicaragua. 2, as a tourist, you have complete rights to start and run businesses in Nicaragua. That is how it is done. So you can come and you can start a business before you get here. You can come here and start a business. There is bend over backwards support for you to start a business. Nicaragua wants you to invest in businesses here, and they will do anything it takes to make that something you're able to do right now. That's, and of course, as you move towards longer term things, the easier it gets. Okay. Why do I then preface this with, we got to talk about the thing above. You said you want to have a cafe on the beach. Nothing wrong with that. However, there's a lot of things that you're saying that hint, and I could be reading into this wrongly, so bear with me. But there's a hint that this is you're trying to solidify your life, you're trying to stabilize things. Your wife is preparing to be a nurse. There's a bunch of things here that are going to be problematic. One, as a nurse, she cannot work in Nicaragua. You didn't say that she needed to do that, but that is a career you can't shift into Nicaragua. No career is. Maybe like gold mining engineer. There's really unique exceptions. But no normal job, including being a nurse, is something you can do in Nicaragua. We have plenty of nurses. That's not a shortage. What we don't have is plenty of employment. And so there's no, and this is really important because everybody thinks there's an exception. There's no exception. As a foreigner, you can't take a job here. And as a nurse, there's really no way to work remotely. If your wife is able to work remotely for Australia as a nurse and just live in Nicaragua while doing it, great. You have a perfect path to a solid, stable, long-term life that will be fantastic. That's like the best combination. So if that's what she's going to be able to do, woo, slam dunk, you're done. The other piece, can you own a business here? Absolutely. Can it be a cafe? Yes, that's totally allowed for all foreign investment. Can it be on the beach? Yes. Can cafes be on the beach? Yes. Every piece of that is 100% allowed even before you leave Australia, even on a tourist visa, whatever, any circumstances. Unless you're an international criminal, you can do these things, no problem. Even if you're an international criminal, you'll probably be able to do it, depending on what you did. What is really important, and you didn't say you needed to make money at this, but running a business here means you are assuming you will lose money to do it. So you're going to pay to run that cafe. That you're worried that foreigners are allowed to own a business hints that you are thinking it's going to be part of your monetary income stream. And it is not going to be. That is not possible, not in a million years. A really good, solid, amazing, long-term business idea, something that's tried and true, really works here, makes sense, will likely have a 5 to 10 year of losing money. You will not be able to establish a life based on it. You will lose money for a really long time or invest a ton and you're only recuperating your investment, not making money. People often get that confused. And after 10 years, either have appreciated land value and be able to bail on the whole thing and make money from that, not much, but some, or finally have a business that has paid its dues, gotten a reputation, you figured out the workflow, and now you're eking in a tiny bit of profit. But it will take decades more to pay back the losses from the first 5 to 10 years. Okay, so if you're opening a business here, you are either 100% ignoring everything I and everyone I know who isn't a con artist is trying to tell you about Nicaragua, or you're intentionally making the decision that losing money to do something you find enjoyable or whatever, you want to employ people, you can have whatever reason that isn't about making money to open a business that you want, great. And that business could be part of your residency. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So there are absolutely wonderful reasons to open a business here that don't involve making money. Great. I want to be 100% clear. And I'm going to say this, 100%, no exception, you cannot make money with a cafe on a beach in Nicaragua. For all intents and purposes, no business on a beach is going to make money. Pretty much no cafe is going to make money. And putting them together is extremely difficult. And if you're trying to do so as a foreigner, it's more difficult just because we don't know the market. Not that they're going to hurt you, right? Not that they're going to like do things, just you don't know the market as well. You don't have the connections, like you don't have that cousin who knows how to make coffee already and just wants to work for their cousin kind of thing. Like you don't have those connections here, presumably, right? So that makes every little thing harder. If I was a Nicaraguan and doing things like opening a cafe like here in my neighborhood, I'd be like, well, my cousin has this horse-drawn cart. He's going to bring the coffee from this place, pennies on the dollar, because he's able to do it between some other job he's doing. And my father-in-law was retired, but he's really into, I don't know, baking bread. So he's going to make some sandwiches for the cafe, and we're going to have like this thing. Like if you have those connections, and like especially if you're from here or if your spouse is from here or whatever, you have so much cost savings and so much ease in navigating the system, and you'll have a family lawyer, for example, ready to go. Whereas if, as a foreigner, it's going to take you 6 months to 2 years to find a lawyer you really trust, and they're going to have to be part of your team, and maybe longer to find the accountant that you're really going to love. And just finding a head waiter is going to take you at least a little while, right? There's all these things. They're going to be really difficult for you simply because you're a foreigner trying to do a business that a local won't run because they don't believe there's any way for it to make money. If they thought they would make money, everyone can open a cafe on the beach. Like, that takes nothing. Every local has the wherewithal to do that and doesn't because they can't figure out how to make any money. And in an economy as low as this, if you could make any money, you would do it, right? And it's this easy. If you're a Nicaraguan and you think a cafe on the beach really has potential and you really have all the connections and you have everything you need to be able to do it, and all you need is the money to open a cafe on the beach, if you have a solid business plan, you can call me and I will help you open a cafe on the beach, right? I would love to have a cafe on the beach, but I know it'll lose money. I need someone to show me how they're going to fix that, right? Or I would never invest because it's nuts. But if someone had that plan, there's investors, and I know a lot of them who would in a second be like, yep, I'm in on that. Because I'd love a cafe on the beach. That would be fun to go to. It would be fun to own, and it would cost so little to set up. So the risk is low and the payoff is pretty decent, especially if it makes money. So be aware that's what you're up against as a starting point, right? And then you have just all the other problems, right? Like, it's just no one's making money. All the existing businesses are losing nearly in all places, right? On all the beaches. So you're looking at a possibility that there's simply no market for it, and people don't look for coffee on the beach. That's really not a thing. And so you're trying to create a market that essentially doesn't exist. There's just so many things there that are so incredibly difficult. The other thing, and this is unbelievably huge, and this applies to everyone. This is not just people listening to this particular question. For all people coming to any new market, you never, this is just general business advice, right? General business rules, how to start a business, include things like make sure you are the expert in your market, make sure you have something unique, make sure you know exactly what makes you different, why other people haven't done it, all that kind of stuff. Coming to a new country, you are always the worst equipped person to start a business. Always. You may have more money, but the people there have money and they have access to money. You may have some market knowledge, but they have more. Like, there's all these things. Anybody who is going to start a business here in Nicaragua, you need to put in years of research first, right? I don't know anyone who's had any success whatsoever. And I basically know almost no one who's had what we would call success, right? No one comes here and makes tons of money. That's not a thing. But if you do come here and you're able to hold on to a place and you're able to make it kind of work and make it whatever, every person who's ever done that has been here first. Nobody comes with any chance of success with here's the business I want to do from afar, go to a place that I have not experienced, and then apply that. It's not going to work, right? Because, for example, it sounds great. A cafe on the beach, who wouldn't want that? The answer is everyone who lives in Nicaragua. No one wants that. There are coffee places on the beaches. Currently, basically no one goes there and drinks coffee. It's just not a thing, right? Well, if I offer great coffee, won't they come? No, that's seriously not a thing. Nicaraguans don't do that. I'm not saying that no Nicaraguans do that, but even in the cities, the cafes are basically always empty. There's no big push for good coffee. It's just not a cultural thing, at least in anywhere near a coast. If you go up to Matagalpa, that changes, right? And it's a new thing, and in time, maybe that culture will make it down to the coast, and I would love that because I want to have an amazing cappuccino while sitting on the beach. I would love that. But realistically, I'm the only one, so it is actually cheaper for me to hire a personal barista than it is to open a coffee shop for other people. I would get better results at a fraction of the cost. I could put in a $3,000 coffee machine and hire a full-time barista who is just my barista. And that would be smarter if the goal was for me to have coffee on the beach than to open a coffee shop. It's a sad situation, but that's real. Now, if you're doing other things, you have a business and it also sells coffee, fine. Like, the coffee may offset the cost of the coffee maker, but it's a very difficult thing in making a shop. I'm just telling you, this is a thing. We've all looked at it. Everyone on every beach has the money. If you are on one of the beaches in Nicaragua, you have enough money to start a coffee shop. No one does, because we've all either seen it fail or know that there's no business or know that there's an existing business that covers that ground that isn't making money from that. But you do not Do not propose a business idea from abroad and be like, I'm going to start from abroad. While legally allowed to do it, terrible idea. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Don't do it when you first get here. Don't make your plans from abroad. Any viable business, this process is going to be 100% of the time. If you have any chance of making a business work, you will get to the country you want to go to. You will spend time and get to know the country, the legal framework, the business framework, the business environment, the investment environment, the specific location you want to be in. You will research the locations. You will research what is being offered. You will figure out what people want. You have to be a part of a place and then say, okay, I see where there's gaps. I see where somewhere else someone has offered, let's just say it's an ice cream shop, right? Let's imagine. And we know those have gone out of business when they're already established, right? So establishing a new one has all this extra overhead to compete against ones that have already gone out of business once established, right? So terrible idea. But I have to convince myself of that because I would love to open an ice cream shop. It would be so easy, and I love ice cream. So you want to open an ice cream shop on the beach. Well, you need to look and say, have any of the beaches had a successful ice cream shop? Okay, one has. Okay, so it's way bigger than my beach, and it already has an ice cream shop. And they're not making a lot of money, but they are open. So that's something. Okay, so that's something to work with. Could the smaller beaches with less money support an ice cream shop? What if I made it cheaper? Could I do that? Would it make, okay, maybe. Maybe you've got a thing. Is there a gap? Are people looking for ice cream? Oh, I was here for a full season. This is important. One of the beaches that I know has seasonal ice cream. At the height of the season, pop-up ice cream companies show up, take over whole buildings, and put in a big ice cream shop just when things are really busy, and they pack it all up and go away when they're done. They make all the money there is to be made in ice cream on the beach. Could you beat them out? I'm not saying you couldn't, but you need to know that that happens, because if you're counting on that super busy time for your ice cream business and then find out there's an established competitor that you didn't know about, the last thing you want to be is the last person in the know for your own industry. Right, and that's the risk you take. When you come, you got to give it time. You got to get to know. You have to do your market analysis. You can't do market analysis from abroad, right? If you were like, I make a hamburger shop in Australia. I'm fantastic at this. I'm going to make one in Nicaragua. You don't know Nicaragua's hamburger market. It's different, and it's really well established. We're famous for our hamburgers. Oh, well, I'll go to Argentina for that. Argentina's a beef country. Like, they really know their beef. I have not had a hamburger in Argentina. I'm vegetarian. But if I was to go there, the chances that I could bring them a hamburger better than they already have for their palate approaches zero. Could I go somewhere in the world and bring them a better hamburger because it's a market that doesn't really have that and maybe convince them it's something they want? Sure, that's possible. That's likely, but I'd have to do my research in the reverse. Here I have a great hamburger product. Where can I find worldwide that is missing that and move to it, right? And that we think they would want it. It's a big combination of things, and it's really risky. International investing is crazy risky. So all of that, maybe you don't want to make money from this. I mean, everybody wants to make money, but maybe you have zero concerns to make money from this, and this is just to keep you busy because of whatever. If so, you don't have to worry about any of the things you're worrying about. Right? You can do anything you want when you get here. You can lose money in any number of fun ways, right? Coffee shops, bars, whatever. Knock yourself out. You're going to have a great time. Be super relaxed. Don't jump into it too quickly so that you don't lose more money than you would necessarily need to. That's important because it's really easy to lose a lot if you don't know what you're doing. But with a little bit of work, having a good lawyer, a good accountant, you'll be okay. Opening a small scale spot is not a problem at all. But you got to go into it with the right mentality. As a foreigner, you're at an uphill battle. As a doing things without doing your market research, you are guaranteed to fail, and by big amounts. And trying to use a business here as a way to generate money is not realistic. Maybe someday, if it's 20 years out, I'm hoping to have established something that will then make money for our retirement. Okay, I don't think it's a good idea, but it makes sense. But if you're thinking this is something you're going to live on, absolutely do not come to Nicaragua with that mentality. The chances of you succeeding in Nicaragua are literally approaching 0%. So that's off the table. Okay, the second one, are we allowed to own motor vehicles legally registered in our names? So yes and no. This one's a little bit complicated, but it's not bad. So let's just answer it. First of all, you probably don't need a motor vehicle. Everybody says they want one, and it's really just a luxury that you can probably do without. Now, if you are going to run a big business here, you may need to run around and do things with a vehicle on a regular basis. But in general, you're going to be serviced better by not owning one, at least if you're looking at the financial picture. I totally understand the luxury of owning one. I own a motorcycle, a scooter, and a car. Right? We use them all. They make our life easier, but we've been here for years and we live in the country, right? So it depends on your situation. I don't want to say you never want one, but you probably want one far less than you think you do, right? That doesn't mean you don't want one. Just it's probably closer to being a one way or the other decision than you perceive. Because this is not Australia. This is not the US. This is not Canada. Those are places that require a car, right? This is Nicaragua. People don't have cars. There's taxis, there's buses, there's all kinds of public transportation, there's all kinds of private transportation in public to get you places. Owning a car can be expensive and just a headache. Now maybe you just want a moto, maybe it's something really simple. Like, it's okay. It's a consideration, but the first thing I just say is don't come into Nicaragua with the assumption you've got to have a car. Maybe you have a really good reason for thinking so, like you've done some research and like, well, this is the location I want to be in and the grocery store is over here and there's no way I'm living without a grocery store. And I'd say, yeah, you're probably right. That's almost certainly true. Still, look at the public transportation options. It may not be as bad as you think, right? Once a month, paying a taxi to drive you around for a day is a lot cheaper than making a car payment every month. So there are different things you need to consider. Really run the numbers, I would say, if money is a factor. If money's not a factor, you just really want to own a car, you just really want to tour around the country all the time and be really flexible. I get it. That's why I want one, right? So, okay, just make sure you're thinking of it in the right way. So can you own a car? In order to own a car in your own name in Nicaragua, it must be in the name of a Nicaraguan resident. There's two ways that you can do that. One is become a resident, but that takes time. So you're not going to have a car on day one under that regime. It's going to take time, and that could be months, it could be years. Normally doesn't matter, right? We say it doesn't, there's no real drive to be a resident, which we're going to get to. But in order to have a car in your name, you do have to do that. And the advantage to having a car in your name, and as far as I know, the only advantage of having a car in your name, is that it allows you to cross the international borders. So if you're like, I want to be able to spend weekend trips driving personally to Costa Rica, or I want to drive to Guatemala or El Salvador and just do things. I want to drive all the way to Mexico and just do road trips outside the country with my own car, you know, pack my bags, throw some sandwiches and go. Okay, yeah, you want to be a resident, you want to have a car in your own name. That's absolutely true. And I make that sound silly. That's exactly how I feel, and that's why I want residency and the car in my name so I can do exactly that, right? The idea that I can run to San Salvador for the weekend, get an apartment, like an Airbnb apartment, and just chill in San Salvador for 3 days and get some nice restaurants up north. Yes, that sounds fantastic. And taking the bus to do that, I'd rather drive. So that would be cool. And then I can do all kinds of filming and stuff, right? Like maybe that's what you want. Fantastic. If that isn't what you want, or it's not a priority, then you want to have a business when you first get here, right? You already said that. Now, I just said you don't want a business when you first get here, probably, but let's assume you do anyway. Everyone does. No matter what I say, they say, oh, well, I'm the exception to every rule, so it'll be fine. If you own a business, your business is a resident of Nicaragua and can own a car, and it's your car. It's not in your name, but the business is in your name, so it's in your name, right? It's all how you want to look at it. Yeah, technically, it's not in your name, but why would you care? Except for that border thing, because company-owned cars can't cross borders. They can drive up to the border, they can drive all over the country, they have no problem at all. That's how people do it, right? So those are the ways that you own a car. There's other ways to have a car if you don't have a business and you aren't a resident, and then it gets complicated, and those things I generally don't recommend. But if you're doing one of those two things, being a resident or owning a business, you are set for owning a car. You're good from day one, assuming you started your business on day one. From the moment you start a business, you can own a car. So it's that simple, right? And you can start a business from abroad. Starting a business is not the same as actually running a business, right? If you want to, from abroad, get a lawyer, set up an incorporation and get that stuff going, it's not called that here, but that, you know what I mean? And then you can register a car and do all that. You can actually do that from abroad and own a car and have the car waiting for you. You can have an employee drop it off at the airport, be waiting at the airport for you to hop in and drive yourself home. Absolutely. You can do all that, right? And that's one of the reasons why it's important to understand that the long-term visa stuff doesn't mean what you think it means, because you can have a total life. You can have a house, car, employees, business. You can do all that from abroad and step off the plane with no visa whatsoever, and you live in Nicaragua with everything ready to go. That's how easy it is. So let's talk about that. Are we allowed to own land? That was the next question. And I mean, yes, right? You can own land, you can own a house, you can own anything, right? Foreigners have open ownership here. There are exceptions, right? I don't think you can own a military base. You can't own the airport, probably. I don't even know. There's some really specific preserved indigenous lands that you're not allowed to own, mostly on the East Coast, which is autonomous regions, and they operate under their own laws. So the stuff that makes Nicaragua work a certain way doesn't apply out there necessarily. Of course, most things apply, but not everything, and you need to be aware that it could be a little bit different. But if you're in Maine, Nicaragua, on the Pacific half of the country, everything's just very uniform and easy and straightforward. And yeah, you can own essentially anything. I know there's a few of the islands I've heard in Lago Nicaragua. I've never heard of anyone who wanted to go buy an island in the lake, or realistically planned to. I mean, everyone wants one, right? But some of those are protected, tons are not. But in any normal part of Nicaragua, under any normal circumstances, you can own anything. There just aren't foreign ownership restrictions in the country in any meaningful way. And there's a few things in the United States that are the same, or in Australia that are the same, Canada, whatever, that there's these really isolated things that you can't own. But in general, you can own anything. So you're free and clear. All that stuff, all those types of things are basically as good as it gets, except for that whole business not being able to make any money thing. But that's not a problem from the country perspective. It's just a market thing, right? Like, it's a tough market these days. You're probably not going to make money. All right, the next one. I've asked previously about visas and was told to just come to Nicaragua. Yes, there is just come to Nicaragua. The moment you get off the plane, you'll be like, oh, I get it now. It's all so easy. Like, it really does make sense. But it's not something I would consider just taking a chance that things will work out. It's a little risky. Okay, no matter where you move, you're taking a chance that things are just going to work out, right? Whether it's the business thing, the working thing, the visa thing, all of those things, residency, whatever, there is no place that you can move on earth where you're not taking a chance by moving there. It's always risky, right? You are going to move sight unseen. So here's something. As someone who's lived in 8 countries and now has a permanent home, like forever, this is my home here in Nicaragua, which is, what does that even mean, right? Yes, this is my permanent home. And then some horrible things happen that we're going to be like, and we're out of here, right? Like, that we have no plans to ever leave. But what does a permanent home really mean? If something major changes in your life, you're just going to pack up and move to somewhere else. For you guys, you probably thought Australia was your permanent home for a lot of your life, and now you're thinking about changing that. When I was young, I had a lot of ideas of where my permanent home was. Now it's here. I assume that it's going to be for forever, but of course that can change. One of the great things about once you realize you can move is that the world is a flexible place and you can go where you need to go. This is important to remember, that you need to, when looking at a new country, leave yourself the flexibility to evaluate it. And, so this is important, right? I've had people who have gone directly without doing their research or trying to do their research, it doesn't matter, and coming to a new country and going, this isn't what I was expecting. And there's no way to prepare someone for what they're expecting. And there's no way to know what someone's expecting, right? Whether it's the way the air feels or the way that waiters bring food at a restaurant, there's just too many little things that you can be really gung-ho on a place. And of course, if you're really excited about a place, you're much more likely to find it exciting and attractive. You're going to have a better attitude about it. But you can be super gung-ho, arrive at a place and go, this is not the place I had imagined, and be very unhappy very quickly. And you can even fall into despair, and you could spend your life savings. You could end up destroying your life because you were so sure that you put all your eggs in one basket, and a basket you had gone to sight unseen, right? And no matter how much it feels like it is taking a giant risk to go and visit places before you move, if you're me, I will just move places, but I'm prepared to just move on, right? And I've done that in the past. Many times with the intention of just moving on. Well, I'm going to just move, see how it is, and then I'm going to move on to another place. That makes it pretty easy. Like, where does tourist end and living begin, right? It becomes complicated, and it's only because I didn't have anywhere else to live. That means that's where I live. But if you're looking at a number of locations and you have not been to all those locations, you probably want to evaluate them pretty heavily and not just move to any of them, because all of them are going to be packed with pros and cons that are surprises to you. Loads of things that are not things you can anticipate. You really want to make solid decisions under normal circumstances. If you have loads of money and it just doesn't matter and it's, you know, you can just pack up your bags and go again, well, you know, maybe move to the first place. Do your best to pick the place that seems best, right? There's something is leading the pack for sure. Move there, be prepared to move on if you need to, but be prepared to not move on, right? That can work great. There's a lot of things to evaluate there, right? There's a lot of maybe this works, maybe that works. It depends on you and your circumstances. I don't know, but I do know the risk of moving to a place, sight unseen, with everything, is so dramatic and so scary and has so much risk of being, oh, this isn't what we thought. And it's not just you, it's your spouse as well, or maybe your kids. Like, everyone has their own vision of what they're getting themselves into. And when they arrive, is going to find some amount of this isn't what I was expecting. No matter how much you tell me about Poland. I've never been to Poland. I've been to Germany. I've been to Austria. I've lived in Ukraine. But if I go to Poland, there is guaranteed going to be so many things that I wasn't ready for. Oh, the language doesn't sound quite like I was thinking. The weather isn't quite what I was imagining. The food isn't quite what I thought it was, right? There's going to be a lot of things, even though I can tell you for certain that I could move to Poland and be happy, right? I know I could. I know the people are nice. I know the food is yummy. I know the weather's acceptable. I know that its position in Europe is, you know, there's all these things I know, right? Could I move there and be happy? But do I know enough to know if it's my best choice or not? No, I do not. And I can't. And you can't know that no matter how much research you do. You may know that Nicaragua leads the pack in how easy it is to move, how cheap it is to live. There's a bunch of things you could know, right? But if you're going to love it, if you're going to get here and be like, this is it, you can't know. You can have a really good feeling. You can do your best to figure it out. But unless you've been to Panama and Costa Rica and Guatemala and El Salvador, you're not going to know which one of those Pacific beaches just feels right under your feet, or which ones got just the way the light reflects off the ocean, or whatever it is that matters for you. Those things are there. And sometimes you get here and you're just expecting something and you don't quite get it. For me, I've been to many places, and when I come to Nicaragua, I just magically feel home and comfort and relaxed, and that's me, and it's lots of people I know, right? I talk to people every day, and I'm like, you know, we know someone, and they didn't fall in love with Nicaragua, and they're like, are they crazy? How did they not fall in love with Nicaragua? But everyone's different, right? And knowing that you could be different, and don't just come here because I'm excited about it, right? Because I can tell you, I guarantee Malaysia is super cool. I guarantee that Thailand is wonderful. I guarantee that the Philippines has lots to offer, right? None of those places are bad. Right? I can tell you lots of reasons why I prefer Nicaragua, and some of them are really concrete, like the time zone it's in, the language they speak, things like that I know beat out those countries. But would eating pad thai for cheap every night make all the difference? Probably not, but it might. Is the view from their beach just so much better that I might just be like, I can never go with another view ever again? Maybe, probably not, but it's possible, right? So testing some of those things, and at least knowing, you don't have to know, this is important, you don't have to know that you found the perfect spot. You only have to know that you found a spot so good you're not going to waste your time still searching, or intentionally still searching. That's really important, and that's something that we had to grapple with. We were searching out every possibility, and both my wife and I were like, let's go every possible place we might want to live. Let's put in a little bit of time living everywhere and just really get to know the world and then make a choice. And at some point we were like, oh my gosh, our life is slipping away and we don't have any anchorage, any permanence to where we do our travels. And we're still based in the US because for a while we weren't, but then we rebased in the US for work reasons. And then it was like, why are we based in the US? This makes no sense. Let's base in the best guess we can make and enjoy travel without having to worry about going back to the US or going back to Australia, going back to Canada. That was the big leap for us, and we figured out that Nicaragua was the best guess we could make of where we wanted to live forever. And here we are, happy. And now when we travel, not only do we travel and love traveling and have more money to travel and more flexibility to travel, but we also get to look forward to going back home. When we lived in the US, we didn't look forward to going back home. We dreaded it. Now we go, oh, I had such a good time traveling, but I get to go home to Leon. And that's wonderful. So that's the first thing. That's really important. I really, really am worried about people who are trying to jump in too fast and like trying to make every decision from abroad, business, jobs, where you want to live, you gotta get some concrete information in there, no matter what. And I know it's expensive to come over, and there's ways to mitigate that, but it's big, right? I totally get it. So the next piece is, because there's no long-term visas. Well, let's stop and talk about what a long-term visa is and what that means to you, right? What is your purpose of a long-term visa? Is it that you can stay a long time? Because you can stay forever by arriving here. So something's wrong. I don't know what the value is to a long-term visa, but let's start with, what is the length of time of your visa when you get here? So when you show up, your visa's 180 days. It's 90 days and you have to do 3 30-day extensions. So it's not exactly 180 days, but it is. That visa that you get on arrival gets extended to 180 days. At the end of that, and we just did this week, you have to do an in and out to another country. We did that to Costa Rica this week, and it took 50 minutes. That does not include time to get to the border, obviously, right? But the actual process took 50 minutes. Was it annoying? Of course. Was it hot? Yeah. Was it fun? No, but we went to Costa Rica for 50 minutes. Okay. And we could have done something fun with that. We could have gone into Costa Rica and done something nice. We could have flown somewhere on vacation and done that instead. We could have driven to Mexico. That would be ridiculous, but you could. There's a lot of things you can do to make that fun. And what we typically do is we go to Costa Rica every year and we go to the US every year, each one every 6 months, right? So it comes out to so 180 days US, 180 days Costa Rica, 180 days US, 180 days Costa Rica, and so forth. Any other trips, like my wife went to Thailand, ended up being that she went to Thailand, so that counted. But all you have to do is just out and back in. Unless you have Interpol looking for you, or unless you're coming from a country that you're not allowed to enter Costa Rica, this is so trivial, I cannot believe how many people bring it up. Like, yes, it's worth noting, you have to, twice a year, exit the country for several minutes. That's all the requirement is, and only until you get residency. So a temporary, insanely trivial task must be done twice a year. Sometimes people have legitimate reasons why this is more than a trivial task for them. But by and large, this is as trivial gets. I have so many normal tasks in the US that require more effort, more money, more time than leaving the country and re-entering for Nicaragua. And considering that you're getting to live at outrageously low cost with no paperwork, right? Just coming in and out on a tourist visa, and you get to own property, own houses, own businesses, invest, do anything you want, and you can own a car as long as it's through one of those businesses. You get all that on your tourist visa, or even without a visa whatsoever. You get those, but then you get... So to us, the tourist visa is at the absolute minimum 180 days with no effort to the re-upping it, or we really look at it as indefinite, because 50 minutes having to leave the country really doesn't qualify as anything but, it's just a reset of your visa. It's just, there's a 50-minute process to reset the visa twice a year. That's it. So the idea that Nicaragua doesn't have a long-term visa feels weird. Both, why would you want one? That doesn't make sense. And what do you consider a long-term visa? Because how is this not the ultimate long-term visa? I'm not saying there's nothing better. It's essentially as good as it gets. I don't know of any country where they have one actually better. Panama's is about the same, right? Albania's, I think, is about the same. There's a few places that have really good 180-day automatic re-upping visas, but they're few and far between. Nicaragua falls at the very best of this. None of the countries that you're looking at, to the best of my knowledge, come close. I know people who've been in many of them, not all, and all of them, even in very small amounts of usage, encountered visa problems much greater than Nicaragua has. And so I'm not confident in the concept that those have easier visas or that those have longer term visas. They may have visas that in some contrived description sound like they will somehow be better, but I don't believe that's actually true. I believe it is just in some way of wording it, in some marketing mode, makes it sound better. But I certainly would not be confident in any of those being better. I don't think any of them are as good. And I know for a fact that, like, Mexico is not as good. And I know that the problems just going through the airport at Thailand or the Philippines is more difficult than living in Nicaragua. So that's really important, that there's some perspective being missed here, that we don't have a long-term visa, or that there's some reason you want one in a different way than what's defined here. It really is about as good as it could possibly be. You get to get off that plane and live in Nicaragua. You never really need to leave, other than every 180 days for 50 minutes, right? That can take longer. You can get stuck in a line. It can be a few hours. But plan around it, do it well. It generally is pretty fast. And that's only if you never travel. Otherwise, you get your automatic visa reset. So that's really important. Now, let's talk about residency. At some point, and generally, this isn't something you should want. And I know there's exceptions, like the I want to own a car and drive over the border thing. Trust me, I get it. By and large, you should not desire residency in Nicaragua. The tourist visa process is so ideal that it is generally the thing you desire, right? Listen to that carefully. If you had your druthers of all the options around the world, it is hard to beat the Nicaragua tourist visa system, not just as a tourist, as anything. Now, what actually happens is that while living in paradise and dealing with this perfect visa system, at some point the government says, okay, that's enough. You do not get to do this forever. Sorry. And the government pushes you to become a resident. And you say, okay, it couldn't be perfect for forever, but this is pretty good. The residency process is not hard, but it will vary by person, and this is a big deal. When you need to become a resident, this is where you have a problem. And this is where now long-term visas might be a discussion. Because in the past, the ease of getting an investment visa was so low that pretty much everyone could just do it, and you're basically just buying your residency. Now, I'm told, but there's varying rules, that the effort to get that is going up. But let's talk about that. So there are 3 paths to residency in Nicaragua, but you don't do any of them until you've done the tourist thing for a long time. And remember, you only hit the residency requirement if you are truly residing in Nicaragua. If you're deciding to use Nicaragua part-time and another country part-time, or a bunch of countries part-time, you don't have this requirement. Everyone we know who's in and out, right? Oh, we do 6 months here, 6 months out. You do not go up for residency ever. That just doesn't hit your radar, right? This is just for those of us who move here and make a full-time life here, right? So we, residents, but tons of people we know, not residents ever. Once you go too far and the government's like, okay, you're clearly not a tourist anymore, then they will tell you it is time to begin your residency process. And they want you to become a resident. Let's be very clear. This is not an opportunity to kick you out. This is an opportunity to make you more a part of the community and to make their lives easier in dealing with you. That's what this is about. So what they do is they look for one of 3 things. Either matrimony, which is going to be difficult because I understand you guys are already married, or investment, which can be difficult because they've upped the number on this, I'm told, to $150,000 per person. Check with an immigration attorney, though, to do this, because there's easily loads of lower cost loopholes, and you just have to make good decisions around it, right? When we came in, the residency visa requirement was $30,000 per adult. I'm sure there's no $150,000 per kid. When they say per person, they mean adults, right? And maybe married couples have some loophole. We have so much investment that it doesn't matter, right? We skimmed over the amount per person, so we didn't have to worry about it being as a married couple or anything. So there's a little bit there I don't know for sure. But no matter what is your immigration attorney that should be answering these questions, because you need that information to be up to date, right? And then the other option is retirement, and it isn't what it sounds like. Retirement happens at very young ages here, and it simply means that you have a constant stream of external income, which of course you need to live here because you're not allowed to work here, and investing here would only lose you money, right? So no matter what, you should have an external stream of income, which one way or another can classify for retirement. Basically, it comes out this way. If you have true retirement, or what's known as a pension, then that you simply have to show a small number of that, around $1,000 a month, and you're good to go. That's retirement. If you don't have that, but you need to show other money coming in, as long as it's a steady stream and it's significantly in excess of $1,000, say it's $1,800 or $2,000 a month, generally they're just going to go, yeah, great, welcome as a resident. They can always kick you out later if things change, or you're not a nice person or whatever. That's always the option of every country. Nobody gets to not kick you out. Like, you never have the right to tell a country, you can't kick me out. That's just not a thing. So, what it does is simply stops you needing to go to the border every 6 months, and instead, every so often, you have to check in with Managua to get your cedula, which is basically your national ID card, updated. It's a little bit of a weird process. I don't know why they do it the way that they do, but they do. So the actual effort doesn't really change. Being a permanent resident or a long-term tourist carries really similar effort. It's not exactly the same, and the process is a little bit different, and there's the process of doing it, and that can take years, and that's fine. As long as you're in process on your residency, you get to be a tourist indefinitely during that time. So the thing that can happen if you're too young to even qualify in any way for the retirement, which I believe you have to be 45, but even that you may be able to fudge under the right circumstances, or you can't come up with the money necessary for an investment, then you can be left in a situation where you don't have a direct, clear path to long-term residency. But this is where it gets difficult and cloudy. If you fall into that gap, then you need to go talk to an immigration attorney, which you need to talk to anyway, and say, here's my situation. Here's why I'm a good resident. Here's what I have to offer. Here's my income stream. Here's my this. Here's my that. How do I put these things together to apply for residency? And they will help you, because this is not like the United States, and I assume not like Australia. Rules are not clear-cut. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a positive way, at least in this case, right? In the United States, if they said you have to make $1,000 a month and it has to be from a pension, no one in the U.S. could retire. Even people with millions and millions of dollars in retirement would not qualify because it's not a pension. It's like a 401k. 401ks to Americans are normal retirement accounts, but to the rest of the world, they're not. So that's potentially a problem. Now, you're coming from Australia, so you probably are familiar with pensions. Most Americans have no idea what the word means because it's so uncommon. We don't have things like that. We do, but very rare. So in the United States, if you had that situation, they would simply look at the paper, go, you don't have a pension at all, so you don't qualify. End of story, shut the door, this conversation is over. In Nicaragua, you start having conversations about it. Well, they're not quite old enough. Maybe we could keep them on a tourist visa for an extra couple years. They don't make quite enough money, or they make enough, but it's not a pension. Maybe we could look the other way, right? Like it's a very conversational thing. Like clearly this is a good person. Clearly this is a person who's paying their bills. Clearly this is a person who's not going to become a drain on the society coffers as they can't pay their bills or anything like that, right? They're not here they've been here for years. They haven't stolen from anybody. They've never been arrested. Maybe we should consider that they make good residents. And then the immigration office has lots of things at their disposal. They can fudge the investment numbers. I don't mean fudge, but they can choose how they view it. They can do the same thing with your retirement. They can work with your ages. They can offer you more time as a tourist, things to make the residency possible for you. We know people that things like this have happened to, right? Oh, they didn't have their investment ready, so they were kept on a tourist visa for a little bit longer. Of course, it can be seen as annoying to be on the tourist visa for longer, but they didn't have to come up with the investment money at the time that they didn't want to, and they were good residents, so they wanted to keep them here. Everybody wins because they're willing to be flexible. And that's the important thing. We're not saying that they're looking the other way on the rules. We're saying that the rules are guidelines. Legitimately, not like speed limits in the US where there's supposed to be rules and people are just kind of, picking and choosing who to apply them to. This is a general set of guidelines to understand who is a good potential resident, who's going to be good for the country. And all you really have to do is show that you're good for the country. That's a conversation. Like, it's not one I can have. I am not the government. I don't represent the government. I don't have access to the government. I don't have access to the latest rules. I only get what the news gives me, which is pretty good, but it's not the exact rule. Like, I don't get access to the books or anything like that. That's what your immigration attorney is for. They will look at your situation. They will have a conversation with you, and they will create a presentation over a course of years to give to the government to convince them as to why you should be allowed to stay. Is there risk to that? Yes, of course. Is that risk, under normal circumstances, anywhere near as high as those similar processes in many of the countries you mentioned? No, I don't believe so. I am told by someone who was just in Thailand that they can't return to Thailand because the visa they got causes all kinds of problems and they require bribes at the border for them to get back in. Is that true or not? I don't know, but from people who live in Thailand, that's what I'm told. Never been told something like that about Nicaragua, right? Here, it's much more straightforward. All those like under the table deals, that's not really a thing here. I'm not saying it never happens, but the way that it is portrayed other places, you would think it worked much like it does in Southeast Asia. It doesn't. Southeast Asia, you have to be prepared for a lot more flexibility in how things work, simply because it's a different market, it's a different culture, it's just how it works there, right? But you have to be aware of those things. So for most people, for most circumstances, the things that you're concerned about, I think, are not realistically things to be concerned about in Nicaragua. Yes, the permanent thing with permanent residency could be a problem. Let's say you guys are 25 years old and you have no savings. Well, okay, that's going to make both retirement and investment essentially impossible. And it's going to be really hard to come up with a combination of things that makes that seem reasonable. So let's assume you can't do that. Can you do it in some of those other countries? Can you come up with enough to make them feel reasonably confident that you will be able to stay indefinitely? Possibly, but I'm not aware of one. Long-term, but not permanent. So then let's get to this, because this is where it really, I think this we've covered all the questions, and now we're covering the unspoken question. What happens if you buy land, buy a house, invest, have a business, make a life, and you are not granted residency? Okay, assuming you're not a criminal, assuming you're not doing anything wrong, you're just not qualifying for residency. You simply don't have the financial resources to do that. You are still an Australian passport holder. Right, you have not given up your citizenship. You're not going to, right? Do not do that, right? You've got great citizenship. Hold on to that forever, right? So what could you do? You have a load of amazing options. I don't know which ones are right for you, but I'm going to give you some ideas, because this is what we would do if we were to lose our residency or not be granted residency here in Nicaragua. But we have things here. We have a home, our dogs, our kids want to grow up here, our friends are here. That poses a potential problem. Sort of. Here's the thing. Yes, it would be less convenient. It would be not the happiest of situations. It would be more expensive. It'd be more complicated. But we have access with very easy, reasonable access to Panama, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and slightly less convenient Belize and Mexico. All of those can be reached by bus from here, or by car, or by plane. We have easy ways to go to all those countries, and still pretty good ways to go to even farther afield if we wanted to go to a Colombia or a Cuba or one of the Caribbean islands, Jamaica, for example. We have lots of options in the area that are very easy, but let's just focus on the ones that we can go to by bus. As Americans, and I believe as Australians, you automatically get 180 days in Panama. You get at least 90, and I believe they just upped it, they did, now that I'm saying it, to 180 days in Costa Rica. You do not get passport extensions if you're in Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador, but you can go to Belize or Mexico. Mexico gives you 180 days as an American. I don't know as an Australian. Belize, I believe, gives you 180 days because they're part of the Crown. And so they have, even though Australia is not, there is a history there. And so because of all those things, it becomes relatively possible to move between the countries and pick and choose which ones make sense for you for the time you're not in Nicaragua. There is this thing you have to be aware of, that the CA4, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, they function together on a single visa, so you can't reset your visa by going to them. But potentially, I don't know how that could play into a residency discussion. There may be ways you can make that work if you exit and go back to them. But, and I believe that they can be used that way, right? So if you wanted to spend a bunch of time in Guatemala City and a bunch of time in Nicaragua, which I would love to do, that I think would count if you did it right. You'd have to maneuver some things. You have to be very diligent with how you do your visas, but should be doable. But if all you wanted to do is do 6 months in Nicaragua, 6 months in Costa Rica, or 6 months in Nicaragua, 6 months in Panama, or bounce around to lots of different places because you just want to explore with the other 6 months, you can absolutely do that. Can you maintain all the things you do in your life that way? I don't know. It depends what you have, but very likely, probably. Things that become difficult is pets, but if you're taking a bus or driving, you can take pets between places. If you're, some of those places aren't as cheap as Nicaragua, but they're often not that bad, especially anywhere except Costa Rica. Costa Rica is pretty expensive. As you do that, right, you get to explore the area, you get older, you accumulate wealth, eventually you can get your residency in Nicaragua, and eventually you prove that you've been a tourist for so long, it gets easier and easier over time. And maybe you find some other place that you fall in love with and you want to move there because you've experienced a lot of it. That's fine. 2, overall, you have flexibility In case of total disaster, such as your camera dying in the middle of a video, anyway, in case of total disaster where you're in a situation where you're not able to stay in the country and you've invested, there are generally, in almost all circumstances, some pretty strong ways that you can mitigate that by going out, staying in a very low-cost location that is not very far away, and coming back on a regular basis. It is only in a situation where you are banned from tourism, generally where you've broken some significant laws, refused to pay your taxes, something of that nature, and even then you generally have quite a bit of recourse. Nicaragua does an awful lot to let you be here and to let you invest and to let you grow. Like, if you're doing positive things for the country, if you're behaving well, they're going to go out of their way to let you stay. And this is more powerful than any amount of visas or paperwork that appears easier in another country. All of those things carry risk. Every country anywhere, including the US, Australia, Canada, they can just kick you out with a moment's notice. Not that they will, but they can. Everybody has that option. And Nicaragua is no different, nor is Malaysia or Thailand or the Philippines. And so you have to have a combination of things that you're considering. One is, what is the realistic paperwork process that is likely to happen? Two, what is the likely to get to stay process that's likely to happen? And three, what are your mitigation options should total disaster happen? And total disaster being you're simply kicked out, right? And really strong property ownership laws here are a really big deal. If you own property here and you need to sell it, well, you have that option. Now, the real estate market here is very bad right now, so you're going to get in cheap, but getting out is more difficult. All right, but that's something to be aware of, that buying at the low means that it's not likely to get any worse. It's almost impossible to get worse. So if you buy now, almost certainly, unless you're holding for just a few days, you're looking at an improvement in the market. So your ability to sell and make more money and mitigate things is that good. Also, you don't need to buy right away. Everyone always jumps on this when moving to a new place, but it's a really bad idea in general. I'm not saying in every single case. Again, there's always exceptions, but let's look at the general case. And I do mean 99% of the time, maybe 98, is that you want to be renting. You do not want to invest in your first year, probably several years. For us, we didn't really invest for about 5 to 6 years, about 5. You don't want to own property. Similarly, again, for us, from the first time that we lived here, it was about 5 years until we really bought. And the only reason that we bought in kind of a weird way was because of COVID. We had some limitations that made it very difficult, and we wanted to take advantage of COVID pricing. And so we had a lot of market knowledge, not as much as we would have liked, and we took some risks because of COVID. That's not happening anymore. Yes, special circumstances still come up, but in general, you don't want to do those things. And we did it with a lot of knowledge in a lot of markets. We knew the risk we were taking pretty well. And I think we gauged it well, but it was a unique circumstance. In general, you do not want to be investing in any type of business. Now, if you're just putting in some effort and you're not really investing money, okay, it's a little bit different, right? And if it's a business somewhere else and you're just living here, absolutely invest away, right? But before you invest in the Nicaragua market, you need to really understand what you're doing. And that only comes with time. And you really want to spend time learning Spanish. If you're going to be doing any kind of business here, you're going to need that for a lot of things. And you need to build up your resources, your lawyer, your accountant. At a minimum, you need those people and maybe a few staff members in place before you ever entertain the idea of discussing what your business is going to be, because you're going to need those people as part of day -1, right? When you're sitting around having your beers and you say, I have the business idea, and you say, what if we built a trampoline park? And they said, that already exists. And you go, oh, what if that's against the law. Oh, what if right? You need them for those things. And just like that, you have answers that you wouldn't have otherwise. And there's other things that you will know. Oh, you know what's missing here, but no one does, right? I don't know, free fall, blower air things where it feels like you're free falling, right? Because they don't do that here. Sure, maybe that's a thing. I don't think that's a good market, but if you steal the idea from me, I'm letting you have it, right? But you have people to discuss that with. What's the insurance going to be like? What's construction going to be like? What market should it be in? You know a lot of those things, and you have those resources to talk to you. You've got to have those people. You've got to have the market experience before you do anything. During that time, should you be buying a house? No, don't buy a house, right? Everybody, and I say this in every video, right? Do not buy houses right away. Come and rent for a long time. You don't just have to discover if you want to be in Nicaragua. You don't just have to discover if Nicaragua has the business opportunities or job opportunities or whatever it is you need. That's one thing. But you also have to figure out where in the country you want to live, where in the country is an option to live. All those things you only discover realistically by living here. Of course, you can tell some things. I can't take the heat. I don't want to be in the mountains. I can't handle altitude. I don't like being by the ocean. There's some things you can determine easily, right? I really want to be on a farm, not in a city. Well, okay, you don't need to go live in a city to figure that out if you've already figured that out. But when you're coming to Nicaragua, everybody has the same challenges. They don't know the lay of the land. They don't know which town or village or farmland is going to be the one that they want. And if you start making decisions from abroad, your chances of getting it wrong are extremely high. And it's very hard to turn over property here. Not that you can't, but it's going to sit on the market for a really long time. So if you tie up your financial assets in a property that isn't perfect for you, you're probably stuck with it, at least for a really long time. And that's going to impact you significantly. Keep yourself loose, keep it flexible, keep yourself agile while you're in the process of learning any market. It does not matter what country you're looking at. It does not matter where you're planning on going. Keep yourself from making life lock-in decisions during a time where you're just beginning to investigate that market. That is going to protect you more than anything. And if you ever say, I don't want to rent, I don't want to wait, I don't want to, trust me, you don't want to move. And you certainly don't want to move here because it's going to be hard and you're going to get so many things wrong and it is going to cripple your life. Unless you have just so much excess money that you're like, I don't care, I just want to pay to make things stable. And if everything's wrong, I'll just pay again. Okay, but I don't think that's the boat you're in, right? I don't think that's very many people are in that boat. So you want your investment to matter, and renting is cheap. I'm going to do another video soon about why renting is so important, such a good idea, but you want more than anything, keep everything agile, but remember, this is probably your safest choice unless you need to make an income locally rather than working remotely. Nicaragua is the best place to work remotely. It is the worst place to try to work locally. So that one factor should tell you an awful lot based on whatever it is you need, right? I don't know which those are for you, so you can apply that, and that's going to give you a guide. If you say, Scott, I really need a local job, you just ruled Nicaragua out, no further discussion needed. I'd be happy to discuss other countries that might be cool for you, right? I don't want to keep you from moving. I don't want to make you or convince you to move someplace that's going to be horrible for you. Is Nicaragua a great country? It's fantastic. I love it here. So many people love it here. But you have to embrace there's some things that are just givens, and that is, unfortunately, or fortunately, a really, really major one that's going to make a lot of those decisions for you. I hope that that answered your question. There were some follow-up questions. I'm going to do my best to hit those in a future episode. This one is really long. You guys seem to like really long episodes, so awesome. Thank you so much for everyone who is supporting the channel and watching these all the way through and putting in the effort to listen to my voice for so long. It really is appreciated, and it makes a huge difference. And even though our views are going down on YouTube, our view time is going up. So YouTube is like, this is fantastic. I don't know what's going on. And we have over 5,000 subscribers now, which is amazing. Thank you, everyone. And so many people are hopping on Buy Me a Coffee to help support the channel, which makes a huge difference. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It really means a lot, your vote of confidence and understanding how much work goes into this and how easy it is for me to fall behind on so many things. I really do appreciate all of that. So thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe. Get down in the comments. I need more of these questions. Everyone seems to enjoy these. I really like being able to answer specific questions because it lets us just dive into real examples of what people are looking for, interested in, or whatever. And I think it helps a lot of people, right? And it helps me have content. So I really do appreciate that. And if you don't have a question, say hi, answer other people's questions, leave your ideas, whatever, and share with friends, post on social media, do all those things. Every little thing you do helps a lot. If you haven't checked out my other channels, I have other things about Nicaragua, like Nicaragua 360 here on YouTube, which is just cool 360-degree views of the country. It's a great way to see things that are different from this channel. And of course, Drive Warp, where I travel around different places and film from the front dashboard of the car, or Nicarumba, where you can listen to music coming here from Nicaragua. Whatever, go check out those channels. The more that you like and subscribe and just watch shows, it helps a lot build our little community of media here. And I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me. I will see all of you tomorrow.